All right, let's see how we can implement a stack using an array. So let's imagine we have an array of 5 elements. Initially, our array is going to look like this. We're going to have 5 zeros. Now let's say we call the push method and pass 10. We want 10 to be stored over here. Then we call push 20, and 20 should be stored here. How can we implement this? Very easy. We declare a count variable and initially set it to 0. So let's revert this array back to its original state. When we call push 10, we're going to set array of count to 10. So we use this count variable to determine the index of the item that we want to set. So 10 will be stored here, and then we'll increment count by 1. Next time we call push 20, we set array of count to 20. So 20 will be stored here, and then we'll increment count by 1. That's the idea. Now, what about popping items from our stack? How are we going to remove 20 from this array? Well, we don't have to. We simply decrement count by 1, and this will give us the illusion that 20 is no longer in our stack. So technically, it is there in the memory in our array, but we don't see it. So we use this count variable to determine where is the end of our stack. Is it here, or here, or here? As we push or pop items, we move this pointer around. That's the idea. Now let's see how we can implement this in code. So I'm going to add a new class, call it stack. Here we should declare a private field, integer array called items, and we initialize it like this. For simplicity, let's say 5 items, so we can see when our stack gets full. Now let's declare the push method, push item. Here we need our counter variable, so let's declare private integer count. We set items of count to this new item, and then increment count by 1. Or as I showed you earlier in the course, we can simplify this code and increment count right here. That is better. Now, what if our stack is full and we try to push an item to it? Well, before we execute this line, we should have an if statement. If the number of items equals the size of the array, so items.length, then we should throw an exception. So throw new stack overflow error. This indicates that our stack is full. So the popular website stackoverflow.com, this is where the name originates from. It represents a full stack. All right, we're done with the push method. Now let's implement the pop method. So public, we should return the item on top of the stack. Here we should decrement count by 1 and also return the item at this index. So return items of count. Now to combine these lines, we can decrement count first and then return items of count. Now, what if our stack is empty and we want to pop it? Well, we should throw an exception. So if count equals 0, we want to throw a new illegal state exception. So we cannot perform this operation for the current state of this object. Now, to make sure that our implementation is correct, I want to override the toString method in this class. In case you don't know what overriding means, that means changing the implementation of a method that we inherit from a base class. In Java, all classes directly or indirectly inherit from the object class. So this stack class, its base or parent class is object, and the object class has a toString method that is inherited in the stack class. Here we can change that implementation and return the content of our stack. So we type public string to string, and also annotate this method with the override annotation. This tells the Java compiler that we're overriding a method inherited from the base class. Now here we want to return the content of this array represented as a string. How can we do that? You have seen that earlier in the course. We use the arrays class. So arrays.toString, we pass our items array here and simply return the result. Now let's test our implementation. So back to the main class. Let's create a new stack. Now, initially, I want to call the pop method. So stack.pop. Here we should get an exception. There you go. It's an illegal state exception, not a null pointer exception. Now, what if we push a few items here? Let's say 10, 20, and 30, and then print the stack. So print line stack. Now, let me pass an object to the print line method. This print line will call the toString method on that object. So let's run the program. This is the content of our stack. This shows that we have implemented the push method correctly because each item is stored at the right position. However, when printing the stack, we shouldn't see these zeros. But this is very easy to fix. We go back to our stack class. Instead of converting the items array to a string, we should copy the content of this stack into a separate array and then convert that array into a string. So here we call arrays.copy of range. We pass the items array and specify the range of items we want to copy. We want to start from the index 0 all the way to count. This will return a new array. Let's call that content. And then we'll convert that content array into a string. Now, let's run our program one more time. So this is the content of our stack. Beautiful. Now let's test the pop method. So after we push these items, I want to pop the last item. Now we should see 10 and 20. There you go. Beautiful. Let's pop one more time. Now we should see 10. All right, these two methods are working. Now let's implement the peek method. So back to the stack class. This is very easy. We simply want to return the item on top of the stack without removing it. So public integer peek, we return items of count -1. Now, what if our stack is empty? Count is going to be 0, so we'll end up accessing the item at index -1. That is going to throw an exception. So this is not a valid operation for an empty stack. So on the top, we should type if count equals 0, we're going to throw a new illegal state exception. Now let's test this. Back to the main class. We don't want to pop any items. We just want to peek the item on the top. So let's call stack.peek. We should see 30 on the console. Beautiful. We're done with this. And finally, we should implement the isEmpty method. That is super easy. So public boolean isEmpty. We simply return count equals 0. So this is how we implement a stack using an array.